The history of air combat in the Second World War is often told through numbers, the statistics of planes produced, the count of bombers shot down, and the calculation of strategic gains. Yet behind every number lies a story of profound individual commitment and sacrifice, particularly within the elite ranks of the fighter groups. The men who flew these crucial missions were the shield of the Allied strategic bombing campaign, engaging in some of the most perilous operations of the conflict. Their actions defined the eventual victory in the skies over Europe, a victory that would have been unattainable without the dedication of units like the United States Army Air Force's 55th Fighter Group. The 55th Fighter Group, formed initially as the 55th Pursuit Group, traces its roots back to Hamilton Field in California in 1940. This early formation marked the beginning of a history defined by adaptability and critical action. The group underwent several early reorganizations before settling into its final structure, eventually encompassing the 38th, 338th, and 343rd Fighter Squadrons. This cohesive unit, led by Lieutenant Colonel Frank B. Jones, embarked for England in September 1943. Their arrival signaled a significant buildup of American air power, as the 55th was one of the early units to join the U.S. 8th Air Force in England, which at that time only had 6 established fighter groups. The 55th Fighter Group was unique upon arrival, being the very first group attached to the 8th Air Force to fly the formidable Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The shift in air superiority in Europe required not only highly trained pilots, but also technically advanced aircraft. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning, the initial mount of the 55th FG, was a twin-engine, single-seat fighter aircraft known for its versatility. It excelled in numerous aerial roles, serving as a fighter-bomber, a long-range escort fighter capable of deep penetration missions, a night fighter, a pathfinder for bomber formations, and perhaps most notably, an aerial reconnaissance platform. The significance of the P-38 in intelligence gathering is underscored by the fact that it was responsible for capturing 90% of all aerial film taken over Europe during the war. This capability made the P-38 a foundational asset during the crucial early stages of the group's deployment. In July 1944, a pivotal transition occurred, when the 55th Fighter Group converted its operations, moving away from the P-38 Lightning to adopt the North American Aviation P-51 Mustang. This change was strategic, reflecting the evolving needs of the air war. The P-51 was a legendary machine, a single-seat aircraft characterized by its high speed and exceptionally long range. These attributes made it perfectly suited for the deeply penetrating escort missions required to protect the vast formations of American heavy bombers venturing into Germany. Beyond its escort role, the P-51 was a potent fighter bomber, equipped with 6 formidable .50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. It was capable of carrying significant ordnance, including up to 1,000 pounds of bombs and rockets. Experts widely recognize the P-51's operational effectiveness and endurance as being absolutely integral in winning the air war over Europe. The 55th FG operated from 2 key bases during their time in England. Initially, they were stationed at Station 131 in Nothinstead, Hertfordshire. They maintained operations from this location until April 1944, at which point they moved to make way for the 398th Bombardment Group, which flew the iconic B-17 Flying Fortresses. The 55th then established its new home at Station 159, located in Wormingford, Essex. From these English airfields, the group launched numerous critical missions. The scope of operations for the 55th FG was extensive and varied, driven by the overall strategic objective of debilitating the German war machine. Their primary duties involved the long-range escort of Allied bombers, ensuring these vulnerable giants reached their targets and returned safely. However, their operational profile also included intense ground attack missions. These often dangerous low-level actions targeted vital logistical infrastructure. The objectives included the bombing and strafing of large marshalling yards, the hubs of the German rail network. They relentlessly pursued locomotives and railroad tracks, seeking to sever supply lines. Other critical targets included industrial buildings and sites, military transport convoys of cars and trucks, bridges, and essential oil depots. They also engaged in traditional air-to-air dogfights and sought out enemy aircraft parked on the ground. These highly kinetic, low-altitude attacks were categorized as targets of opportunity, maximizing the destruction inflicted upon the enemy's resources wherever they were found. The nature of these operations, especially the low-level strafing, meant that the pilot loss rate was tragically high. By 1944, estimates placed pilot losses well above 50% for groups like the 55th Fighter Group. When Second Lieutenant Jim Ragsdale McCutcheon arrived later in the summer of 1944, the losses for the 55th were still staggering, estimated around 52%. This dangerous reality defined the experience of every replacement pilot joining the fray. The pilots of the 55th and other fighter groups frequently flew across the English Channel into occupied France, specifically for low-level interdiction missions. These were not routine flights, they were high-risk assignments. The pilots coined a unique and evocative name for these aggressive ground attacks: railroad rodeos. This Western-inspired term perfectly captured the essence of their relentless shoot-'em-up style bombing and strafing attacks aimed at disrupting the enemy's movement. They specifically hunted railroad yards, locomotives, oil cars, ammunition cars, and troop carriers, alongside other targets along the rail lines.
The 55th Fighter Group became exceptionally proficient in this particular brand of warfare. The group was easily identifiable by the distinct green and yellow checkerboard patterns painted on their engine cowlings. Their reputation for effectiveness earned them a formal Distinguished Unit citation. Moreover, their focused destruction of enemy rail assets gave them an informal but deeply respected moniker, Loco Busters, derived from the fact that they destroyed or busted more locomotives than any other fighter group operating within the 8th Air Force. This identity as aggressive ground attackers underscores the crucial strategic shift in air power, moving from purely defensive escort to proactive offensive interdiction. Against this backdrop of intense aerial warfare and high risk, the story of one young pilot provides a poignant window into the group's reality: Second Lieutenant Jim Ragsdale McCutcheon. Jim McCutcheon was born on September 13, 1923, in Fort Davis, Texas. His family, including his parents Bennett Brazil McCutcheon Sr. and Celeste Nee Holt McCutcheon, owned and operated a sizable ranch situated approximately 16 miles outside of Fort Davis. Jim was the youngest of 5 children. Even from an early age, Jim exhibited an affinity for aviation, building and flying balsa wood model airplanes. This pastime may have accurately predicted his future passion for flight. Family recollections paint Jim as a capable and strong young man, though sometimes opinionated. His physical presence was notable. At over 6 feet tall, he was considered very tall for that era. His early life was marked by significant tragedy. His mother passed away in 1939, followed by his father's death in 1940. This left Jim an orphan at the age of 16. Following these losses, he moved to Victoria, Texas, where he lived with his uncle, Jim W. Ragsdale. After completing high school, Jim pursued higher education at Texas A&M University in College Station. However, the escalating global conflict and the call to duty were powerful. Jim eventually left the university to enlist in the USAAF, committing himself to the war effort. After rigorous training, specifically qualifying as a P-51 fighter pilot, Second Lieutenant Jim McCutcheon arrived in Warmingford, England in 1944. He was assigned to the 338th Fighter Squadron within the 55th FG as a replacement pilot, filling one of the numerous vacancies caused by the persistent high loss rates. Jim's considerable height earned him a distinctive nickname from his comrades, Big Stoop. He officially joined the 55th FG in England on August 3, 1944. Tragically, Jim McCutcheon would be killed in action before the end of that same month. His final mission took place just 9 days after his arrival at the base. On August 12, 1944, the 55th FG's operational objective was a dangerous one: dive bombing and strafing the oil tank cars located at the Ars marshalling yards, an important enemy logistical hub situated southwest of Metz, France. This was a classic railroad rodeo mission. Jim was part of a raiding force composed of 26 Loco Busters. He flew a P-51 Mustang marked by the U.S. government tail number 4413744. The official record of Jim's last flight is pieced together through a missing aircrew report, MACR number 07770, which includes the account of his flight leader. Captain Lenoy D. Anderson, another P-51 pilot on that mission, reported the critical details of the event. Lieutenant McCutcheon was flying in the crucial number 2 position on Anderson's wing. The flight was heavily armed for their mission against rail transportation targets, each aircraft carrying 2 500-pound bombs. Captain Anderson's flight selected the marshalling yard at Ars, noting the presence of 25 to 30 oil tank cars along with other miscellaneous stock. The attack commenced with the bomb pass, initiated from 7,000 feet, running parallel with the tracks from north to south. Anderson described his own maneuver, recovering from the bottom of his dive at 2,500 feet, executing a sharp break to the left and up, and then swinging back to the right. Lieutenant McCutcheon followed his leader down into the dive. However, Anderson nor his 3- and 4-man wingmen saw Jim after that initial dive. The immediate aftermath was shrouded in uncertainty. Jim was not observed to crash anywhere near the immediate target vicinity. The prevailing assumption among his flightmates was that he must have completed his bombing run and then peeled off to begin strafing targets of opportunity on his own, a standard yet deadly deviation on these missions. During the subsequent effort to reassemble the flights, Anderson attempted to call Jim twice over the radio, receiving no response. Anderson initially attributed this silence to the general congestion of radio traffic at the time, suggesting Jim might have been confused or simply failed to answer. It was only on the course heading back to England that Jim was called again, and was then definitively confirmed to be missing. The cause and the precise location of his loss remained unknown to his squadron at that time.
However, the subsequent history of the war and later investigations provided the grim clarification. A German report, identified as J-1950, confirmed the destruction of Jim's aircraft. It stated that an aircraft was downed by anti-aircraft fire (flak) at 1:30 p.m. or 13:30 hours. The pilot was dead, and the plane was reported as 99% destroyed. The location of the crash was pinpointed 1 kilometer east of the town of Ruvigny, south of the Orne River. Furthermore, the report confirmed that Lieutenant McCutcheon was buried in the Ruvigny Cemetery. Second Lieutenant Jim McCutcheon was just 20 years old when he was killed. The mystery surrounding Jim's loss endured for decades, though the memory of him remains strong within the McCutcheon family. Critical MACR documents, which could have provided more clarity, were not declassified by the U.S. government until 1978. Jim's great-nephew, Dominic McCutcheon, and his family have been actively seeking further information regarding Jim and the exact events of his final flight. In 2023, Dominic McCutcheon embarked on a personal pilgrimage, a journey recounted in an article marking the 80th anniversary of both Jim's death and the liberation of France. He reflected on the significance of remembering his great-uncle, a man from Texas whom he had never met, yet one held in esteem by his family, his home state, and the French people. Jim had been killed while flying his P-51 Mustang over German-occupied France. He had arrived at Wormingford, England, only 9 days earlier. The mission, part of the 55th Fighter Group's relentless commitment to air superiority, was conducted under extreme risk, given the unit's estimated 52% pilot loss rate. Dominic's narrative expanded on the specifics of the railroad rodeo that day. The target area was near Metz, France. Jim had been last seen diving toward the oil cars and miscellaneous stock, trailing his flight leader. After releasing his 2 500-pound bombs, he somehow became separated from his flight, and radio communication failed. 73 years later, Dominic found himself standing 60 miles west of Metz, on the periphery of the picturesque French commune of Ruvigny, south of the Orne River. Furthermore, the report confirmed that Lieutenant McCutcheon was buried in the Ruvigny Cemetery. Second Lieutenant Jim McCutcheon was just 20 years old when he was killed. The engagement began just after 1:00 p.m. The occupiers opened fire on the approaching Mustang. Jim immediately responded, unleashing his machine guns. From within his bubble canopy, he watched the tracers find their targets. The Mustang, with its bare aluminum skin, glistened as the engine efficiently consumed fuel, leaked oil, and powerfully snorted out its exhaust. Jim expertly maneuvered his aircraft, twisting, reining, and spurring the plane as the immense 11-foot propeller pulled the Mustang high above the chaotic melee he had initiated. It was a moment where pilot and machine, both in their prime, were in harmony, fulfilling their dangerous assignment as loco-busting airmen. The precise length of the engagement, including how many strafing runs Jim managed, remains unknown. Yet Jim clearly upheld the fierce reputation of the 55th Fighter Group.
He put up a good and spectacular fight, demonstrating the bravery expected of any seasoned Loco Buster. However, the advantage of altitude and speed could not entirely neutralize the ground defenses. At 1:50 p.m., the occupying forces got lucky, and their concentrated anti-aircraft flak finally brought down Jim's powerful and beautiful Mustang.
The crash was devastating. Jim's Mustang hit the ground 1 kilometer east of Ravigny-sur-Aisne, right alongside the railroad tracks, near the woods. A sickening thump echoed through the town, signifying the total obliteration of the fighter plane and the fighter pilot. This crash brought delight to the occupiers, but dismay to the local French population for whom Jim, only 20 years old, had just sacrificed his life. A French child who witnessed the chaos that day later provided a written account of the aftermath. The rough translation recalls that chaos ensues in the Maginot Quarter, where the occupying troops were stationed. Local farmers, along with their horses and carts, were promptly requisitioned to transport whatever wreckage or salvaged materials they could find. The market square became a hellish scene as tiger tanks and other armored vehicles sought cover beneath the chestnut trees. Some of these vehicles were still ablaze, and water from the nearby canal provided a welcome relief. The witness vividly recalled seeing a German soldier brandishing a rifle with a burnt stock. Toward late afternoon, despite their parents' strict prohibitions, the town's children ventured out toward the rail yard to witness the destruction. It appeared that the entire yard was engulfed in flames. The sky was dark with thick smoke, which stretched for over a kilometer, reflecting various colors in the dying light. Enemy voices were heard everywhere. Even hours after the attack, unrestrained train engines still struggled to move away from the inferno. The requisitioned farmers' horses stamped their hooves and neighed in nervous convoys, loaded with salvageable items, heading toward the Maginot Quarter. Meanwhile, the young children, ignoring the danger, scavenged the site for tobacco cartridges and, perhaps more eagerly, for sweets. Following the horrific crash, the French townspeople took custody of Jim's badly broken body. The local police formally issued his death certificate, noting an identification bracelet found securely fastened on his right wrist. Townspeople then respectfully wrapped Jim's remains in a mattress cover. A funeral was held, officiated at the town's military cemetery, where the young American airman was laid to rest alongside French national heroes. Colorful flowers were placed upon the American's grave marker, a gesture of honor and respect, which sadly the occupying forces eventually ordered to be destroyed. This astonishing history, only recently learned by the McCutcheon family, was the driving force behind Dominic's journey to Ravigny-sur-Aisne. Standing atop the hill, overlooking the town that had provided such honor to his great-uncle, Dominic felt unsure how to proceed or how to fully express his family's long-overdue appreciation for the respectful and honorable way the French had treated Jim. He drove his rental car into the town center and parked along the quiet main street. He had arrived without a detailed overall plan, and, notably, he could not speak French. However, he was well prepared, carrying duplicate photographs of Jim posed proudly in front of his Mustang and translated handouts clearly explaining his purpose. The handout began, "Dear Sir or Madame, I am the great-nephew of James Ragsdale McCutcheon, an American P-51 pilot who was shot down and killed nearby here." As Dominic began the task of sliding the photos and handouts into mailboxes and beneath windshield wiper blades, he mentally calculated his chances. He estimated the odds of finding anyone who truly appreciated or remembered the significance of August 12, 1944, to be roughly 1 in 2,700, an unfavorable ratio relative to the town's population. He prepared himself for the very likely possibility of failure, acknowledging that too much time had seemingly passed since 1944. He was soon drawn into a small local cafe by the comforting aromas. Feeling a growing sense of hopelessness, he settled at a table, placing the photos and handouts down, and ordered simply by pointing at the menu, inadvertently revealing himself as a tourist. Then a moment of profound connection occurred. He felt a hand gently placed on his shoulder. He turned, surprised, to find a middle-aged Frenchwoman seated behind him, motioning toward one of the handouts.
Dominic immediately offered her one of the photographs. In silence, her eyes moved between the handout and the photograph of Jim, who was remembered as very handsome. Then her expression changed, mirroring the realization of the loss of a loved one, perhaps her own son, and her eyes began to fill with tears. She swallowed hard, then raised her forefinger, signaling him to wait. She flipped open her cell phone. Other diners quickly gathered around her conversation, and the entire cafe soon became animated with whispers and accented chatter.
Something significant was clearly taking place. The woman possessed local connections. Just moments later, the town's vice mayor, Elaine Fisnot, entered the cafe. Through his earnest but broken English, coupled with friendly gestures and palpable excitement, Dominic finally understood that Revenilles-sur-Ornon absolutely appreciated the profound significance of August 12, 1944. There was a great deal they needed to discuss, and a meeting was scheduled for the following day at the town hall. Dominic enthusiastically accepted. The next day, Dominic arrived at the town hall. This very building had been occupied by the enemy during the war. As he was led upstairs, the wooden stairs beneath his feet creaked. He wondered if the stairs had sounded the same on August 12, 1944, and who else had gazed out those same windows when different flags and banners flew outside. The upstairs room felt dignified and steeped in history. A serious portrait of André Maginot watched over a large wooden cable. Here Mayor Pierre Bourgain, Vice Mayor Fisnot, translator Michel Mathieu, and a small group, including the local press, stood waiting respectfully. These good people, the leaders and chroniclers of the town, all knew the immense significance of that August day in 1944. They had gathered there, drawn together by a man from Texas whom none of them had ever met, yet whom they all deeply honored and wished to remember. The vice mayor immediately presented Dominic with Jim's official death certificate and a copy of his missing aircrew report, MACRR 7770, documents that had been unavailable to the family until their declassification decades later. He also provided a copy of the powerful narrative written by the French child witness detailing the fight's aftermath. They compared notes, dates, and names, cementing the historical record. Together, they reviewed Jim's squadron records for the 338th, a unit that humorously referred to itself as Earthquake Magoon's Flying Circus. One photo captured the flying circus posing together in front of their Quonset hut. The photo was dated August 11th, the day before Jim's loss, and showed them having a jolly good time during a chicken fry, celebrating nothing in particular. Dominic noted the shared youth, joviality, and apparent sense of invincibility radiating from the image. This memory was juxtaposed with the harsh reality that the very next day, August 12th, 2 other pilots from the 338th were also lost elsewhere in France. Second Lieutenant William E. McMillan was killed in action when he pulled up too late while strafing a locomotive. First Lieutenant Richard J. Keogh was taken prisoner of war after he successfully bailed out of his Mustang, which had been damaged by the explosion of a locomotive he had just strafed. The casual celebration on August 11th stood in stark contrast to the unit's operational casualty toll on August 12th. Dominic shared cherished anecdotes about Jim. He recounted the family lore detailing Jim's cowboy background. Jim would sometimes venture across the border into Mexico for the night, only to return at dawn looking slightly tipsy, disheveled, and marked with lipstick. He would then retire to his bunkhouse where he could be heard lazily strumming his guitar while dramatically singing, or sometimes yelling, an intentionally obnoxious rendition of Home on the Range, the classic folk song that romantically celebrated the working life of an American cowboy. This shared moment of cultural and personal history bridged the vast distance between the wartime pilot and the current gathering in the French town hall. Mayor Bourgain then pushed the town journal toward Dominic, offering him a pen and inviting him to formally record his thoughts. Recognizing that standard words felt inadequate for such a moment, Dominic wrote and then pronounced aloud, as best he could, his family's profound appreciation for the honorable manner in which Revenilles-sur-Ornon had honored Jim's sacrifice and faithfully kept his memory alive through the intervening decades. The meeting culminated in a highly emotional and unexpected gesture. On behalf of the entire town of Revenilles-sur-Ornon, Mayor Bourgain used Dominic's physical presence to formally and posthumously present the town medal to Second Lieutenant James Ragsdale McCutcheon. Dominic later gave this meaningful town medal to his father,
Bennett Browning McCutcheon Sr., who had known Jim and greatly admired him, particularly for the ultimate sacrifice he made for the greater good. The heartfelt presentation concluded with Mayor Bourgain offering Libby's kisses to both sides of Dominic's cheeks. In the deep quiet that settled over the room following the ceremony, every person present acknowledged that no words, stories, documents, physical gestures, or gifts could ever fully express the depth of emotion felt for Jim. Dominic felt Jim's presence and hoped Jim could feel theirs in return. It was a moment so profound that even the ghosts of the occupiers would likely have been touched by the ceremony. Everyone, whether physically present or felt in spirit, left that historic room feeling fundamentally changed.
Just 2 weeks after Dominic left France for home, the town demonstrated its continuing commitment to Allied memory. Revigny-sur-Ornon rededicated a monument specifically honoring Allied airmen killed in action during the Second World War. This French commune recognizes the lasting significance of August 12, 1944, and other dates that memorialize the sacrifice of the airmen who fell before the town was finally liberated on August 31, 1944. The town's history of sacrifice includes not only Jim McCutcheon, but 8 other Allied airmen. These include Charles Malcolm Baer of the USAAF, killed on October 14, 1943, after his aircraft was rammed by an enemy fighter. Also listed are 7 airmen lost on July 19, 1944, when their Royal Australian Air Force RAAF Lancaster bomber was shot down by a night fighter. These were John Charles Broughton Boydell, Alan Wesley Giles Fripp, Beverly Hudson Gifford, Philip John Pierce, Raymond George Shipway, Frank George Spencer, and Harold Newell, Royal Air Force. The town of Revigny-sur-Ornon thus stands as a permanent memorial to international solidarity and sacrifice. The operational history of the 55th Fighter Group is a compelling case study in the evolution of air power during the critical mid-war period. The group's initial role, flying the P-38 Lightning, leveraged the aircraft's versatility for high-altitude escort and essential reconnaissance. The fact that the P-38 secured 90% of the aerial film captured over Europe highlights the strategic importance of this particular aircraft and the pilots who flew it, setting the stage for future operations. When the group transitioned to the P-51 Mustang in July 1944, they adopted an aircraft perfectly optimized for the demands of long-range air superiority. The P-51, with its long range and powerful armaments, including the 6.5 caliber machine guns and bomb capacity, became the definitive escort fighter, critically important for the overall air strategy. The deployment of such advanced fighter technology was directly linked to the Allies' ability to sustain the heavy bombing campaigns that were systematically dismantling Germany's industrial and military capacity. The strategic missions of the 55th FG demonstrate the dual nature of fighter operations in 1944. While escorting bombers was paramount, the execution of aggressive ground attacks, the railroad rodeos, proved equally vital to crippling enemy logistics. These low-level interdiction missions, targeting the circulatory system of the German war machine, the marshalling yards, locomotives, and oil depots, were inherently high risk. The environment was often saturated with heavy anti-aircraft fire, flak, leading directly to the terrifying casualty statistics. Pilot losses estimated to be over 50% during that year. The group's hard-won distinction as Loco Busters, earned by destroying more locomotives than any other unit in the 8th Air Force, signifies not just their success, but the ferocity of the combat they faced daily. Jim McCutcheon's brief tenure with the 338th Fighter Squadron, part of the Earthquake Magoon's flying circus, tragically encapsulates the immense human cost of these operations. His arrival as a replacement pilot, necessitated by the unit's attrition rate of roughly 52%, places his story firmly within the context of continuous dangerous necessity. The mission on August 12, 1944 was typical, a dive-bombing attack on the Ars marshalling yards. Captain Anderson's report vividly details the sequence of the attack, noting the critical point where Jim followed the flight leader down through the dive from 7,000 feet. The subsequent ambiguity surrounding his disappearance, whether he became confused or simply continued his attack runs, highlights the chaos inherent in low-altitude combat. The German record, J1950, provides the concrete, terrible fact, downed by flak at 1:30 p.m. near Revigny. Jim McCutcheon, the young Texas cowboy, succumbed to the dangers of a strafing run,
a tempting, albeit very dangerous, action for a pilot with unspent ammunition and a desire to prove himself as a Loco Buster. This final act, engaging the hostile ground troops despite having expended his bombs, underscores the aggressive, dedicated spirit of the 55th Fighter Group. His commitment was such that he was willing to face the concentrated ground fire, culminating in the crash that destroyed the P-51 and killed the pilot at 1:50 p.m. The aftermath, witnessed and recorded by the French child, confirms the severity of the engagement. The images of requisitioned carts, burning tanks, and the rail yard engulfed in flames 2 hours later paint a picture of immense destruction caused by the raid, and particularly by Jim's final spectacular stand. The enduring legacy of Jim McCutcheon's story, 73 years after his death, transcends military history and becomes a testament to memory and cultural honor. Dominic McCutcheon's journey to Revigny-sur-Ornon was not merely a historical inquiry, it was a deeply personal mission to bridge the gap between Texas ranch lore and a French wartime cemetery. The initial difficulty of his task, estimated at 1 in 2,700 odds of finding someone who remembered the date, underscores the challenge of historical recollection across generations. The instantaneous, heartfelt reaction of the French citizens, starting with the woman in the cafe and culminating in the formal gathering at the occupied town hall, speaks volumes about the enduring appreciation for Allied sacrifice. Vice Mayor Fisneau and Mayor Bourgain, by sharing the physical documents, the death certificate and MACR, and the local narrative, ensured that Jim McCutcheon's history was fully integrated into the town's own identity.
The poignant exchange of memories at the town hall, the mayor presenting the official documents alongside Dominic sharing the humorous, humanizing tales of Jim's cowboy life and his obnoxious singing of Home on the Range, was instrumental. It recognized the totality of the man, the jovial, sometimes opinionated youth, the intrepid airman, and the ultimate sacrifice. The posthumous presentation of the town medal was the ultimate symbol of this bond. By formally honoring 2nd Lieutenant James Ragsdale McCutcheon, the town of Revigny-sur-Ornon validated the purpose of his dangerous mission and honored the sacrifice made for their liberation. The event confirmed that memory, when nurtured and respected, can truly bridge 8 decades of separation. The fact that the town rededicated a monument to Allied airmen just 2 weeks after Dominic's departure further solidified their commitment, explicitly recognizing Jim and 8 other airmen lost in the vicinity. The final journey of Jim McCutcheon's remains mirrors the larger institutionalized process of remembrance. Initially buried in the military cemetery at Revigny-sur-Ornon, his body was later disinterred following the war. After World War II concluded, the U.S. Army Quartermaster Graves Registration Service meticulously processed the remains of fallen American service members. With family permission, these remains were either repatriated to the United States or permanently interred in an American Battle Monuments Commission (ABMC) cemetery. Jim's body was moved to the Epinal American Cemetery and Memorial, located in Dinozay, France. The cemetery was established in October 1944 after the area's liberation by the U.S. Army 45th Infantry Division. Today, 2nd Lieutenant Jim McCutcheon rests in peace among over 5,250 of his World War II comrades in arms at Epinal. The grave of the young replacement pilot, the Texas Cowboy, is now a permanent marker of the 55th Fighter Group's dedication and the global nature of the sacrifice that secured liberty over Europe. The legacy of the 55th Fighter Group is woven tightly with the narrative of strategic air interdiction. Their transformation from the P-38 Lightning, a crucial reconnaissance and escort platform, to the definitive P-51 Mustang represents the technological necessity of winning the air war. The P-51 was a marvel of aviation engineering, combining speed, range, and firepower necessary to fight deep within German airspace. The aggressive doctrine of the railroad rodeo, where fighter pilots turned their high-performance aircraft into instruments of ground destruction, defined their role. The 55th FG's earned title of the Loco Busters serves as a military citation of effective, dangerous operational strategy. This strategy, however, demanded a steep price, evident in the persistent high casualty rates. The individual story of Jim McCutcheon provides the deeply human context for these numbers. His life,
transitioning rapidly from a Texas ranch and university life to a crucial combat role in the 338th Fighter Squadron was a microcosm of the vast American mobilization effort. The specifics of Jim's final mission, captured in the stark contrast between Captain Anderson's uncertainty and the German flak report, revealed the swift, brutal realities of the air war. Jim's decision to continue strafing, even after dropping his bombs, was the choice of a pilot committed to the Loco Buster ideal. This aggressive action, while fatal, ensured that the mission inflicted maximum damage on the enemy logistics in Revigny-sur-Ornon, an essential strategic point due to its rail yards. The account of the French child witness vividly underscores the immense scale of destruction Jim unleashed in his final minutes, an inferno of smoke and fire that dominated the town for hours. The enduring nature of Jim's sacrifice is perhaps best illustrated by the multi-generational effort to preserve his memory. Dominic McCutcheon's pilgrimage was a direct response to the family's learning of the true circumstances surrounding Jim's burial and the honor bestowed by the French populace. The declassification of documents like the MACR, long after the war, was critical in allowing families to finally close these historical chapters. The successful connection made by Dominic, stemming from a simple visit to a local cafe, and the emotional reaction of a French woman, demonstrates the lasting cultural impact of the Allied effort. The fact that the leadership of Revigny-sur-Ornon, including Mayor Bourgain and Vice Mayor Fiznon, met Dominic with such reverence and shared their archival documents highlights their commitment to memorialization. The historical significance of the town hall, once occupied by the enemy and now hosting a ceremony to honor a fallen liberator, adds layers of meaning to the event.
The ceremony itself, where the town medal was conferred posthumously, marked the formal acceptance of Jim McCutcheon into the collective memory of Revigny-sur-Ornon. This act of recognition transforms the sterile military record into a living history, ensuring that the young Texan cowboy who joked and sang Home on the Range in his bunkhouse is forever remembered not just by his family, but by the people for whom he died. The French town honors him alongside 8 other Allied airmen who fell fighting for the town's liberation, solidifying their shared sacrifice. The final resting place of Jim McCutcheon at the Epinal American Cemetery and Memorial ensures that his commitment remains part of the permanent historical landscape. Moved from his initial grave in the Revigny Cemetery, he now rests within a landscape specifically established to honor those who fell in the European theater. The sheer number of graves and names of the missing at Epinal, over 5,250, is a profound statistical representation of the human cost of the campaign. Jim McCutcheon's presence there symbolizes the culmination of a life dedicated to service, from the vast open plains of Texas to the crucial air war over occupied France. His story and the meticulous care taken by the French citizens and military historians alike emphasizes that while the war was won through strategic maneuvers and industrial might, the sacrifice of individual airmen like Second Lieutenant Jim McCutcheon was the fundamental currency of victory. His memory serves as a permanent bond between the United States and the French communities liberated by the brave pilots of the 55th Fighter Group, the dedicated Loco Busters of the 8th Air Force.